Hi everyone, welcome to episode 110 of the XS Noize Podcast. I'm Mark Millar, thanks for listening. In this episode, I speak to ride guitarist and songwriter Andy Bell. If you missed the previous episode, I spoke to Bruce Foxton and Russell Hastings about their latest album, The Butterfly Effect.
We write the music first, pretty much with some the melody line is always in there anyway, the vocal melody line. So we'll record the song and then we'll go back and put the vocals on, lastly. That's what happens with it. There's nothing gets to the studio stage unless it's gone through the test, really. So people said, was there anything on the album that didn't make it? Well, no, because it wouldn't have got to that stage, because we don't have the big budgets like record companies do, to demo stuff, did we, Bruce?
No, exactly. We knew we had 12 good songs, and just talking about how it's been received, we didn't write to please anyone, we just wrote what we wanted to record and listen to, and if it appealed to the public, then great, but it wouldn't have been, a terrible loss if they didn't dig it. We know that.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with that, Bruce. Yeah.
So check it out. And if you like the podcast, please subscribe for free and share it with your friends. If you want up-to-date music news, album reviews and interviews, then check out our main website at accessnoize.com. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Search for the tag at XS Noize Music. Here's XS Noize writer Daniel Lynch with a taste of what's been on the website this week.
Is there any band more regularly compared to Marmite than Nickelback? People either love them or hate them, but Rebecca Haslam has discovered on their new album, Get Rolling, why they've outlasted many of their contemporaries. Rebecca says the album starts strong with San Quentin and Vegas Bomb, but nosedives in the second half. 6 out of 10 from us, but you can decide for yourself, and the latest single is streaming now on the website. Last time out, we had a review of their latest album. This week, there's news of a tour from Larkin Poe. The sisters have a run of dates across the UK and Europe next year. We also have the new singles from Enter Shikari and the Slow Readers Club. Finally, our glorious leader, Mark Millar, was at the NI Music Prize ceremony in Belfast, where Robocobra Quartet picked up the top prize for Best Album. You can see who all the winners were and read his article from the night at xsnoize.com.
Ride guitarist and songwriter Andy Bell has released a series of EPs featuring remixes, acoustic versions and covers of songs that inspired his second solo album, Flicker. In this interview, Andy talks about all of the above, as well as what Ride are up to now, his time with Hurricane No. 1, Oasis and lots more. So sit back, relax and enjoy the XS Noize Podcast with Andy Bell. Hi Andy, welcome to the XS Noize Podcast.
It's great to be here with you, Mark.
It's great to have you. You're a very busy man. You've been in a lot of bands I love, from Ride, Hurricane No. 1, Oasis, BDI, and you're putting out stuff as Glock and your solo stuff. So we've lots to talk about. But first of all, I like to go back to the start. Can you remember the first band or artist that made you pay attention to music?
Yeah, I guess it would have been the Beatles. The Beatles records were in the house. My dad had bought a few as a student in the 60s, and he also had a Simon & Garfunkel record as well. So they were just around, and I used to play them, and that's what got me into music. Early Beatles stuff, like with the Beatles sort of era. And then I started to, I think I was around 10 in 1980 when John Lennon got killed, and because I was already kind of into them, I had a mate at school who was also kind of like a Beatles fan. That got me really into them. We started to go and like find records at record fairs and build up the collection. And I remember hearing stuff like Strawberry Fields for the first time a year or two later, and just kind of having my mind blown by how they changed, And then there was a Christmas around the early 80s. I think it might have been the year after John got shot, maybe, when they showed all the Beatles films at Christmas, and seeing them all in one go just like cemented it. But yeah, I mean, so there was that to start with. And then in terms of contemporary music that I was around for, the Smiths would have been the first band. So going forward a year or two from the Beatles stuff, I was about 13, 14 when I heard the Smiths on Janice Long's show on Radio 1, and went out to buy a cassette of the album that I'd heard on the radio, which was the first Smiths record, and they didn't have it, so I ended up buying a Cure album instead. So Smiths and the Cure were like pretty much in parallel.
Yeah, and all great bands you mentioned, from the Beatles, Simon and Garfunkel, the Smiths, the Cure, and they're, still blowing our minds with their music now. Beatles certainly were so ahead of their time. I remember myself. I remember when John Lennon died, I was probably about 8. And my dad,
so we're the same age roughly.
Yeah, my dad played double fantasy. Yeah, I remember that. Never forget that.
These moments stick in your mind. I mean, I remember seeing all the news footage of the people with candles in Central Park. Remember that? Yeah. It just seemed to be a really big moment for the planet, I guess.
Yeah, and even I've seen when I'm looking through old footage and stuff, and even when you see the news announcer announcing that John Lennon had been shot dead, it still gives me chills.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
When I think about that, yeah. What a waste of talent.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and it's funny because he was so actually young. It's kind of weird thinking that I'm 12 years older than he got to be, and I don't know. Like, it's just the age thing is weird, and time, the way time passes. Like when I first heard the Beatles, they'd only been split up for about 10 years, and you think about 10 years now, and music is nothing. 10 years ago, everything was still pretty much how it is now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what age were you when you decided to pick up a guitar and write songs, or just play it?
I was always pretty much single-minded that I was going to be guitarist in a band. And this is going back to the age of around 9 or 10. I asked for a guitar for my 9th birthday and got one, and then started getting lessons in school. But then, because I was leaving the guitar propped up on the wall, the guitar kept falling over and getting smashed. And also I didn't really like the lessons. It wasn't exciting. So there was a bit of a false start there. I had a guitar, but I couldn't play it. And then at a certain stage, I had an uncle who was a folkie, Uncle Pete. And he, at a family get together, he showed me a couple of chords, and it was like G and C, or the simplest chords you could get, and taught me how to play some very simple song like She'll Be Coming Round the Mountain, and I had 2 chords going, and that set me off. I just played the 2 chords for a while, and then started to work things out myself. And I'd never got on with learning music properly, theory. So I always just learned from someone would show me the next chord to learn, and I'd pick that up and then carry on and pick stuff up from records.
And can you remember the first song you wrote on a guitar and you thought, right, this is a really good song, I'm on to something here?
Well, I know, I wrote a couple of songs as a teenager that were, I don't really remember what they were like. They were kind of just very early kind of stuff. I'm trying to think of a title of one of them, but it doesn't come to mind. But I know the first Ride song that I wrote was Close My Eyes. And that wouldn't have been too long after, because by the time I was writing songs, I was like 15, 16, and then Ride started when I was 18. So it was like only about a year later that I was starting to really think about it seriously. Yeah, so Close My Eyes was the first Ride song that I did.
You released your album Flicker at the beginning of this year, which I really enjoy. It's your second solo album after the excellent View from Halfway Down, and you've also released the Glock album. So what was the catalyst that made you decide to put out solo music?
It was... Well, the Glock thing was the first part of it, and that was because I decided that I wanted to try and do scoring, like for film music or TV music, because I had this kind of little collection of electronic instrumentals that seemed to be building up a little bit, and because I'd moved from Logic 9 to Logic X, which is the software I was using to make demos and stuff. I don't know if you use that kind of stuff yourself, do you?
No, I don't make music. Make podcasts. That's it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'd always been. I mean, I'd started off on cassette and 4-track cassette, which is all very much like it is a tape machine. It mimics a tape machine. When you get to a studio, it does the same thing. You know, so in the studio, you kind of you can get your head around what the tape machine's doing. The multi-track, it's recording 16 or 24 tracks instead of 4. So then. From there, I was using. I think when I was living in Sweden, I got like a thing called an ADAT, which is like a similar sort of deal, really, like your own personal 24-track machine. And then computers came out, and my first, like attempt at recording music to computer, I was trying to basically use like a tape machine. Didn't quite know what I was doing, but I recognized the controls and managed to get sound into it. So I was happy. But then this is why I ask you about Logic thing, because when Logic went from version 9 to version 10, or like X as they call it, it got super complicated. Suddenly, from being really like instinctive, it was like I could not work it out. So I ended up taking a course to figure out how to use Logic, and realized while doing this, like an adult learning, college thing, but it was like once a week, and I did that in 2014, I think it was 2013, 14, and I kind of realized that there was loads and loads that you could do with the sampler and the onboard effects and the onboard synth sounds in Logic. It had so much going on that I hadn't really realized. So having figured it out, I started to make music myself in that vein. So I was doing a lot more, and then started buying synths. And BDI had been recording with Dave Sitek in 2012. And that was also a big part of it, because Dave had loads of synths in the studio, loads of pedals, and he had a very free attitude to having a synth set up for a bass sound, but putting it through guitar effects, and everything was going through everything else, and there seemed to be no rules as to what you could do with either synths or guitars or pedals and effects. Everything was allowed to go anywhere, and that's obviously that's obvious, but I hadn't really clicked for me, so that was part of it as well. So there I was with a load of tunes that I didn't think were going to ever be like a band type song. And these are the songs that made up the Glock first release, which is called Dissident, which is like a compilation of tracks that I'd previously released just out into the ether anonymously, basically. I had the name Glock, but I didn't attach myself to that name. I just put them out via a label called Globe, who's tied into Universal Music. So they kind of signed me as a composer, and we floated some tracks out there to see what happened, and basically nothing happened. So these tracks had been out for a certain amount of time, and then I think about a year after, or even 18 months after, I was contacted by a friend of mine, Joe Clay, who had managed to find out that it was me doing the Glock stuff. And he said, "Oh, that Glock stuff's really good. And it's you, isn't it?" And I was like, "Yeah, it is." And he'd said that Pulsing was one of his favorite tracks of the year, and that he had a dance label, and would I be interested in putting the stuff that I'd released out in one, physical format. So we did a tape, and then that did really well. So we ended up doing vinyl, and then that was Glock up and running. Then from that point, I started doing remixes under the name Glock. And when lockdown came along, I decided to follow up with a real Glock record, and that was, by that time I had put out my solo stuff too. So it's a kind of long-winded answer, but your question was, how did I start doing solo music? And that was kind of the first toe in the water with the Glock thing, but that was started off very under the radar. But then Nat Cramp from Sonic Cathedral in 2019 he approached me and said, "Do you think that Ride would be up for doing given me a track or two for a single. You know how you do like what they call like a singles club, where you buy in for the whole year and you get sent 12 singles. He had done one of those. He'd set one of those things up, and Ride didn't end up doing it. But I said, well, Ride can't do it, but would you be interested in anything from me? Because I kind of felt like, well, maybe this is the time. And he said, yeah, that would be cool. So I found him 2 tracks to put out, and that was my first step into solo music properly. And that was Plastic Bag and The Commune. And I suppose what made me do that was actually, you know what? By that point, I'd recorded the basic tracks for The View from Halfway Down and Flicker as well, because the real catalyst for it all was David Bowie dying.
Right.
So if you think back, I guess it was 2016, January 2016, when we all woke up to the news that David Bowie had passed away. And it was something that I felt really, really sad about. And just felt that his music had formed such a body of work. And I felt like I knew who he was through his music. And I suppose that started me thinking that would people know who I am through my music in that same way, you know? Mm-hmm. And it made me think about doing some stuff on my own that would help people to be able to see who, you know, like, do you know what I mean? Like,
yep.
More than just a band member. Like, if you're listening to a band, you're never quite sure on a personal level where things are coming from. So I don't know, I kind of felt it was important somehow it felt important to reach out and connect to people and let them know what I was about in a musical way, if they hadn't already twigged it from the various things I'd been part of already. But so that was why I recorded that stuff, and I ended up doing a month or two of quite casual sessions with Gem Archer, who lives very close to me in North London. He has a studio and I don't have a studio, so he was round at my house having a cup of tea in the week or two after David Bowie had passed away, and was chatting to him and just talking about this feeling like, you know, I think I might want to do some recording on my own, and would you be up for like letting me use your studio? And he was really up for that. So we did that and did the songs that became The View from Halfway Down, and also Flicker, most of Flicker as well. And
Flicker, I mean, a lot of the stuff on that was actually remnants going back from the 90s. You know, what sort of state were those songs or demos in when you decided to revisit them with Gem?
Half done. Everything was half done. And that was kind of the point, I suppose. It was, I mean, there was only, out of maybe 30 songs or more, only 2 or 3 of them had finished melodies and vocals all written and ready. The rest were just ideas that were floating around that I hadn't managed to pin down yet. So to take an example, Cherry Cola, that was a riff that I'd had and had maybe 5 or 6 or more goes at writing words for it or getting a melody for it. Same thing with Lifeline, same thing with Love Is the Frequency. These are all tunes that have been knocking about for such a long time. And most of them with a kind of folk core, like acoustic songs. So if you're sitting around, for me, if I'm sitting around playing the guitar at home, I'll normally do like a finger picking kind of style is why I absentmindedly play, and often come up with something that could be a song. And half the time it would, but a lot of them were left over. And I think, you know, approaching the session with Gem, I had a set of rules in mind, which was really come down to the studio with one guitar, use that guitar for every song. And it's like an acoustic, like a thin line acoustic, archtop, I think they're called. And put down acoustic guitar, bass and drums, and if I've got a melody, sing it in. But, you know, get down there with an idea of how the arrangement is going to be and commit to it. And that's then going to be it. So that I'm going to end up with the decks cleared and everything will be, and you know, like all these ideas that are just muddling me up, just get them all down. Just do it once and for all. So that's what I tried to do. And we did one a day. And normally it would be like a couple of hours, and then I'd be off back to my place and sort of would start thinking about the next one. And then there was a long time when nothing happened because Gem became busy and I became busy too, because we were actually at that point about to start writing and demoing for the album, the Ride album, Weather Diaries. Mm-hmm. So to put it in context of where I was, I'd just done a year of reunion touring with Ride when this all happened. And we had come off the road, back home, having some time out and starting to come up with ideas for the Weather Diaries album. But this was, as you can hear from what it's like, it's not very ridey.
Apart from the song something like Love, it reminds me of Vapor Trail from Ride.
Well, yeah, that is, yeah, and that is one that dates back from that kind of time as well. So, yeah, I can hear why you say that.
Yeah, the intro sort of reminds me of it.
Yeah, I stuck it in the set. See, that's funny because the song was in a different key, and it was too high for me to sing, so I couldn't get my head into it. And I brought the key. I thought, well, I'll just have to bite the bullet and re-record this one. So I moved it down to the key that I thought would be right, and lo and behold, it's in the Vapor Trail key. And that, when you play it with the Vapor Trail chord shapes, it just takes on this whole nostalgic, melancholy, euphoria thing that Vapor Trail's got. So I kind of, instead of trying to get away from that, I decided to embrace it, because the song's it's because it's written back then as well. Half, you know, like in terms of the basic bones of it are written in that decade. And
fans like to hear that. Fans like to hear sort of nods like that as well, you know.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, you know.
I love the Stone Roses backwards stuff, especially on Looking Glass, you know.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's fun to do. I mean, I periodically do one of those tracks. I did one during the BDI times as well. There was one called Dreaming of Some Space, which is one of the BDI tracks backwards. Was it Soul Love or I think Start Anew, actually, on the B album. Did you ever hear that?
Yes, Dreaming of, yeah, I was going to get to all that. That's coming down the line.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
But even the album's artwork acknowledges your past, you know. The photograph on the album sleeves, and I take from the inner sleeve of Ride's debut album, Nowhere.
Yeah.
Which is it's great to have all that sort of things, throwbacks and stuff, you know. And you mentioned Gem, you know, he's, you know, been a constant in your career, basically from Oasis and then through to BDI. What does Gem bring in the studio? What does he bring to the table?
He's just very good at it. He knows what he's doing, and he's got very similar taste in music to myself, and that goes a long way. So I'm not technical like that. I'm sort of musical, but not technical, and he's both. So he's really good at getting the sounds that we like. So that's it really. I mean, it's just he's got the wherewithal, and he has this studio space, so it just works musically with Gem. It's just easy. There's no real need to explain anything.
And you've also released 3 EPs featuring remixes, acoustic versions, and cover songs that inspired Flicker. I love the David Holmes rework of The Sky Without You. So how does it feel when you hear your songs interpreted by other artists?
It's a lot of fun to hear. I mean, I was so excited to hear what David did, because he requested to do that particular song. I'd asked him to do a remix, and he agreed to do it. And then he came back and said, could I do that one? And whenever someone says that, you know that you're going to get something good, because they've obviously got ideas in mind, and what he did with it was so lovely. It was just brilliant.
Yeah, David Holmes is great.
Yeah. I have about 25 versions of it as well, because every time he works on it, he'd send me a couple of versions, really excited. And now I've got like a whole album of versions of it, which are all brilliant. And it gets better and better as it goes.
The last EP that's coming out, it's coming out by the time this podcast, it'll be next week. So it's the Untitled Film Stills EP. And your version of Yoko Ono's The Snow Has Fallen, it really puts me in a Christmas mood. It's great.
Yeah. Well, I've always wanted to do a Christmas single.
Yeah. And the Kinks, the way love used to be, is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
Why do you like them songs so much? Why did you put them in?
Well, the Kinks one was actually a request that Nat Cramp said, could you do that? Would you have a listen to that? Because he had always thought it would be a good cover for me to do. So when I mentioned I was going to do an EP of covers, he was like, oh man, you got to, check out that Kinks song. And I'd never heard it, even though
you haven't heard it.
I do have the album it's on. But I'd never actually clocked that tune. And when I heard it, I was absolutely, I'm such a huge Kinks fan. I can't believe I hadn't come across that tune before. But yeah, it did really fit my kind of range and stuff. That was good to do. And so the Yoko Ono one, Yoko Ono, and I mentioned her in the album. There's a song, which song is it? On the song Jenny Holes Would Be Good. There's quite a few references on that to different people, including Cindy Sherman, who did the Untitled Film Stills, which gives the EP its title. Imagine this. Imagine, what was it now? There's a Yoko Ono quote in Grapefruit. I think it's part of Grapefruit, where she says, I think it's imagine the sky filled with 1,000 suns. I think it is that one. Or it could have been imagine the sky without you, or I don't know which one I wrote and which one she wrote, but anyway. One of those lines is hers. And I wanted to kind of refer back to the album. Like I wanted to keep Flickr in mind with these EPs and think of ways to expand people's, I guess, enjoyment of the album and refer back to it a little bit. So there's the acoustic versions, which kind of bring it back to how the songs got written and put together, like in the kitchen sort of vibe before they even get to the studio. Then you got the remixes, which is other people's interpretations. And then you got my covers of people that inspired stuff about the album or, are related to it in some way.
Yeah, it's a fantastic idea. Isn't it that way? It's real journey.
Oh, it's good to hear. It's really about keeping people's interest and drawing their attention back to the record, because albums and just music in general can get lost in the maelstrom of information that everyone is getting all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Within a week of an album release, people's on to the next thing. It's mad these days. I think it's because people don't have the physical copy a lot of the times, and it's just they're just streaming it. And if the physical copy's there, they'll remember it because it's there, and they can hold it.
You're right. Things have changed a lot, but I'm not, like a Luddite about it. I'm the same way. I'm a product of these times as much as anybody else is, and that's kind of how I consume music too. So there's a huge. My kind of method is I build a enormous Spotify playlist every year with that year as the title, and then I'll add things and add things and add things, and I'll keep referring back. If someone says, "What have you been listening to?" I will go back and pull stuff out of the list. Mm-hmm. And when something sticks for a while, then I'll probably go, "Oh, that's something I should buy." Like last year I bought the Floating Points and Pharoah Sanders album, and the physical records I buy, there's not very many of them. Like I might buy 5 in a year or something now these days. It's changed a lot. Well, I'm definitely going to be buying this year. I think I'm going to get a copy of the Panda Bear and Sonic Boom record, Reset. I think it's called Reset. That just came out, and that is absolutely blinding record. Okay. I know I'll play a lot. I know I'll play that a lot in the house.
I must check those out actually. So you'd just be a vinyl person? Would you not buy CDs anymore?
I'll buy the odd thing on CD. Like I bought the New Age Steppers did a box set, and Adrian Sherwood and the Slits and various people from that scene. And because I didn't really have the budget to spend, I guess it was about 60-70 quid on a vinyl box set, but the CD box set was like 15 quid. So I was like, well, I'll just get that. That's easy. And
that's what I do.
Sometimes, yeah, you know what I mean? Like occasionally it's all right to do that.
Talking about physical copies of stuff, Ride have recently reissued your classic albums and early EPs, which were a long time coming, in my opinion. Do you get involved in the reissues?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Wichita were the main driver. They did such a great job with it all, and we've been working on it for quite a long time in terms of finding archive photos and things to put in the packages, and just to conceiving the whole thing and trying to figure out a sleeve design for the idea of making the EPs into their own album, which took a while to get something that really fit. We wanted to do artwork that really tied into the original EP artwork, but somehow make it new as well. So yeah, I mean I think that came out really well, and also it changes it so much to have that actually be a record, an album. Yeah. So you're suddenly hearing one whole EP as side one, and then one whole EP as side two, and so on. It does change the way you listen to it. Absolutely.
And Ride head out to Australia and New Zealand at the end of the month on a Nowhere anniversary tour. So how much are you looking forward to that?
Oh, very much so. Yeah. I mean, this Nowhere touring is it was all scheduled to happen in 2020, and the fact that it hasn't happened in 2020 means that we were going to do a summer of it and then carry on with whatever else we were going to do next. But now, because of COVID, everything has just become this like non-time specific moment now, where we're still in this kind of 30-year anniversary supposedly, but it's 2-3 years later. Time is just moving, but everyone is just kind of going with it. No one's really questioning it. No one said to me, why are you doing a 30-year anniversary nearly 33 years later? Because I think everyone just gets it. Yeah. It's just COVID. And what that's meant is, I think we could get to places that we wouldn't have got to, because we would have drawn a line under it and said, right, let's move on, let's get on to the next thing. But as it is, we have the time to go to Australia. We've got the offer, there's more stuff to. I think we've got one more little run of dates after that as well that is going to be announced soon, that is sounding good as well, like somewhere else. So yeah, the Nowhere stuff is great to play. It's very cool to be doing these album shows where you get in the headspace of where you were at that age, and what you thought an album should sound like, which is a very different thing to playing your greatest hits. It's like playing Nowhere is weird, because you start with Seagull, which is really crazy, and has this incredible kind of climax to it, and then you get another really fast song, and then the whole thing slows down to a snail's pace for about 3 songs in a row. There's like 3 ballads, which when you do it as a gig, I mean, I found very odd in the beginning of doing these anniversary. It's like, wow, this is crazy. But I've got used to it now, and I think people in the audience just remember the album, so they want to hear it that way.
Ride's second album, Going Blank Again, is actually 30 this year. I remember buying it, and the day I came out after hearing Leave Them All Behind, it just blew my head off. Fantastic tune. It was produced by yourselves and Alan Millar, who also mixed Nowhere. What can you remember about recording that album?
Well, just by the way, we have done a couple of shows playing that record recently, and it's a much better album for a gig. Really, yeah, it's much more natural for a gig, because you have this big introduction with Leave More Behind, which is just this almost like Ride's theme tune, Yeah. It starts off with the bass and drums, and then you get the guitars coming in, and the vocals come in, and it all, kind of brings you in really in a great way to a Ride show. And then there's a real flow to that one as a gig, which feels a bit more natural. But yeah, the recording sessions happened back in 91, so we'd done Nowhere and gone on tour with Nowhere around the world, which was really brilliant times. But we were kind of knackered at the end of that, and went into the studio pretty soon after that, without really having any songs. But we just had the studio time booked, and it was a residential studio for the first time, because Nowhere had been done in a studio called Blackwing in London, and for that we sort of rented a little flat, which is, you would now have an Airbnb, you know, like a little, I don't know, bedsit flat in Paddington we all shared. But this was a residential studio, so it was that whole lifestyle where you come in the morning and somebody's there to make you breakfast all together, and you sort of sit around and talk about the tune you're going to do, and it's very, you just feel like a proper, you know, working musician, rock star, I should say. I feel like a rock star in a residential studio. I challenge anyone not to. And so, yeah, it was just like, wow, the momentum felt good. We were coming up with great ideas. And yeah, it was very, very creative album to do together. Probably the high point of the original era of Ride, because everything felt very positive and it was coming really easily, you know, musically.
Yeah, I spoke to Mark Gardner before you come back with the last two albums, and he told me at the time that it was his favourite Ride album.
Yeah, I think we all feel that it was a real high point. And when we got back together again, after the reunion tour, there was a discussion where we were like, do we want to do another record? Do we want to go there? If we do, how do we approach it? And we had a conversation about this, and it's funny because we all kind of said, like, it would be good. It was very good to have the chance to redo the way that Ride finishes, you know, not that we're planning to finish any time, but like, in the 90s, after Going Blank Again, we carried on with Carnival of Light and Tarantula, which, you know, there are people there that think those albums are great, but I don't think we were playing to our strengths necessarily. And especially towards the end, it was kind of a bad vibe with the band. So this discussion we had about going in the studio again, when we got back together, it was like, what would we want it to be like? And we all mentioned Going Blank Again being a good example for how we'd like to record. And that's what Weather Diaries was really. It was like some kind of echo of that. So Weather Diaries, in a lot of ways, was sort of conceived as an echo of the way we approached Going Blank Again.
Yeah, it's another fantastic album, you know. But round about that time, you know, Red were signed by Alan McGee to Creation Records, who at that time were putting out, you know, Loveless, the first House of Love album, Screamadelica, and of course Oasis. What was it like at that time? Did you feel lucky to be on such a great label? Did you realise how great Creation was then? Or was it only, you know, looking back, you realise?
We knew it was great at the time. It was one of our favourite labels. We were very much like music press reading indie kids. So we knew that Creation was a great label, along with like 4AD and what else was around at the time? Maybe Rough Trade, maybe, and Cherry Red. There's a few great labels around. But yeah, Creation was one of the best, and we loved the House of Love, the Mary Chain, and Primal Scream, and the Valentines. And so yeah, it felt like a great place to be signed to, for sure. And although I'm not sure we appreciated quite how special it was, because we just didn't have anything to compare it to until a lot later on. Now you look back, and what I think about now when I think about Creation is, it kind of, you know, you think, well, we were so lucky to have Alan McGee sign us, because he did never put any pressure on us to do anything a certain way. We were given free rein creatively. He let us do things like not have an A-side on a single. So we were allowed to do EPs, which is what one of our ideas, to have 4 tracks with the titles going around in a circle with no A-side, no B-side, and keep it quite mysterious, not have band photos. And then when it came to the album, Nowhere, you know, we didn't have anything on it from the previous singles. We just did a whole set of new tracks. And all those things, you probably would get those rough edges shaved off, or those artistic edges shaved off by a label with more of a kind of mainstream approach. But creation didn't do that to us. They didn't ask us to be anything we didn't want to be.
And then when Ride parted ways in 1995, while recording Tarantula, you formed Hurricane #1 with Alex Lowe, and your first single was Step Into My World, which is another belter. When you wrote that, did you think, this is easy? Because it was a hit, you know, it's just so easy writing this music and it's becoming hits.
I don't know, really. I mean, I was not in the greatest headspace for those years with Hurricane. Hurricane, it was a good time, and it was good to be with those guys and record music with them and play with them, tour with them. I think it was all part of a kind of rebound from Ride, where I just wanted to do the opposite, and I wanted things to be simple. So it was. I don't know really what I was trying to do with it, but it was just kind of, I just want to be the songwriter and the guitarist in this band with like Oasis, you know, like everyone have a role that is defined, and I was the guy that would play guitar and write the songs, like Noel, and there would be a singer that could sing, and they would sing all the songs, and you know, that way. That was what Hurricane was really, and it stayed within that lane until it kind of ran out of steam. So it kind of shows what happens when you start a band with that kind of, you almost hem it in, I suppose. But it was all part of the process, really, and I do like the music we made a lot.
Yeah, Step Into My World's a brilliant track, and the Perfecto remix is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I love that song. I love that record, how it turned out. It was that was a real little moment of magic on that record.
So after leaving Hurricane #1, you nearly joined Gay Dad until you got a call to join Oasis as a bassist. So what happened there? What's the story?
The story is, so I'd moved to Sweden, and I was kind of taking a break from music. I was telling myself I'd retired from music, because Hurricane did leave me pretty, like, I don't know, I think the 90s had kind of like caught up with me or something. Just felt exhausted and just wanted to be at home, and I just had a kid, had my daughter Leia, so I ended up living in Sweden, and this guy Cliff Jones that I'd known not that well, but like I'd met him a couple of times because he had been a writer for a guitar magazine that had interviewed me in the early 90s, and we kept in touch. Said, "Oh, I've got a band now, and my band's playing Stockholm. Do you want to come?" So I went to the gig, and the gig was great. This was Gay Dad, and then something happened where they had lost a guitar player, and Cliff said to me, "Could you do us a favor and fill in on guitar for us for like, I think it was a tour of Germany they had to do." So it was coming up to Christmas that year, and he just said, "Look, just do us a favor." And I was like, "Yeah, all right, cool, I'll do that." Then in between him asking me and it happening, I got this call to ask me to come and try out for Oasis, and it was all very hush hush. So I came in, tried out for the band, got the gig, was absolutely buzzing, but then realized I had to basically pull out of this Gay Dad thing. I had this terrible job going to Cliff, like, "Cliff, man, I'm really sorry to let you down, but I can't do the tour, and I can't tell you why." But he was super cool about it. He understood it was something important and just was a real gentleman about the whole thing. So I do appreciate that. And then, so the rest is history, as they say. I ended up joining Oasis for the tour for it was Standing on the Shoulder of Giants record, and the first dates was these American dates at the end of '99, and doing very short gigs on a kind of package tour with Beck and the Foo Fighters, and I think Blink-182, maybe a few bands doing like short sets around American cities, and fantastic times.
I'm actually surprised you had the audition to be in Oasis, because I'm sure you knew the guys pretty well from being on Creation as well. And bumping into
I knew them a little bit. Yeah, I mean, they all knew that I was a huge fan because I used to always go to their gigs. I used to go and see them. ended up going to some of the really early ones. So everyone talks about this gig at Water Rats at the beginning of '94, and I was at that gig, but I was also at a gig previously. There was a gig at the Powerhouse, which I just happened to be at. In fact, going back earlier than that, when Ride was doing the Carnival of Light album, we were recording out in Los Angeles, and we were just doing some kind of demos and writing with George Trikulius, who was also about to start work with Primal Scream. But me and Mark had sort of gone out to write with him, ran into the Scream, all got together, and then that ended up working with George from that point. Anyway, that's a whole other story. Mm-hmm. But while we were there in LA, Alan pulled out this cassette of the Oasis demos and played it to us, and I was sold on them right from then. That was stuff like there was a demo tape with about 5 songs on it. I think it was the one with the flag wrapped up in a sort of circle. You know that?
Yeah.
That, Bring It On Down and Married with Children was on there, and it was it was just brilliant, just super sonic music. Well, no pun intended.
But I suppose you had the audition because you actually ended up playing bass for Oasis. So how did you
this
find
is it.
out?
I wasn't the bass player, so I had to try and. I mean, I played it all wrong. I came in there and tried to play the bass with my fingers, and I didn't actually know what I was doing, to be honest. But I was obviously a good guitar player, so I got handed a bass, started playing what I could. And Noel said, well, look, for a start, you've got to use a pick. Griggs always used a pick. Mm-hmm. So he handed me a pick and I started using a pick. Then it felt a bit more punk rock then. That was good. That was a good step. And then I started to get my head around it. And I picked it up pretty quick. But I did have to go back to Sweden and spend a few weeks doing nothing but play bass for 12 hours a day to get it all into my head and to figure it all out. Because I wanted to nail it. I wanted to nail it so hard. I didn't want there to ever be any doubt that I was the ultimate bass player for Oasis at that time. I wanted to play all the bass lines just how they should be,
And nearly you did. And can you clear this up for me? I don't know whether this is an urban myth or I've read an interview saying it. I went to see Oasis play Belfast on the Heat and Chemistry tour. And I heard this, right? During the encore, when you were playing My Generation by The Who, one of your bass strings snapped, and it was the exact day and time that John Entwistle died. Is that a myth or true?
Well,
or what is it?
I did break a string, and someone told me that was what date it was. So, yeah, mad. That's
spooky.
Spooky, yeah, spooky stuff.
Yeah, and I'm sure My Generation is a hard bass part to play.
Yeah. I had to basically make my own version up of it, because that solo it's nobody else but John Entwistle can play that solo the way he does. It's almost, it bends time kind of thing. It bends music and time. It's so it's so overwhelming. Not really quite sure what he's doing, but I just did my own version of it.
Yeah, it's a great version, and I'm sure you
tried to have the spirit tried to keep the spirit of the original, but do it my own way.
Well, the spirit was definitely there in Belfast that night.
Yeah, it was.
So when you joined Oasis, did Noel Gallagher say, "Look, have you any songs?" How did you feel presenting your songs to Noel Gallagher and the rest of the band?
Well, when I came for the audition, the night before I actually came to the studio, so I got to London and got to my hotel. And Gem and Noel turned up at the hotel, and we went for a few pints in the pub and just had a big chat. And at the end of the night, even then, Noel was like, I want you guys to bring songs in. I mean, we talk about an audition. I mean, I think it was mine to mess up rather than having to really prove myself. I think I was kind of in, unless it went really bad, because even before I'd played a note, they were talking about, Noel was talking about well, you want you guys to write songs too. That's where we wanted to go. And So yeah.
And you did on Hidden Chemistry, you wrote the sort of musical interlude, A Quick Peep. And Oasis has been renowned for their B-sides back in the day. Thank You for the Good Times, which is a fantastic tune. It should never have been on a B-side.
Well, I think it's a fantastic tune because it's on the B-side, because that's very much in the spirit of the early days where there was these great uplifting songs on the B-side. So it's perfect for that.
I suppose you're right.
An example, but like Underneath the Sky. Is it Underneath the Sky?
Yeah, it's a B-side. Yeah,
it's Underneath the Sky. The tune it's almost like starts off like an alternative version of Live Forever with a drum beat, and it's got this amazing long solo at the end. That's that one, isn't it?
I think so. I can't remember. I know the song. I'm just trying to sing it in my head.
It's like a long chorusy solo at the end, like a chorus effect on the guitar.
Underneath the Sky.
But the words that you think and the words they won't let you say. One fine day, gonna leave them all behind. Wouldn't be so bad if I had more time. Sailing down the river alone. And I don't mind being up. What's that song called?
No, that's not on this. That's
What am I thinking of?
Listen Up. You're singing Listen Up.
Listen Up.
Yep.
Sorry. Oh, God.
Don't worry, that was good.
apologies to everyone.
Yes, but that is the track.
Up. It's that kind of tune.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking. That was the sort of uplifting, so good because it's on the B-side. That's the vibe.
Yeah, that is a brilliant track, actually. And then on Don't Believe the Truth, you wrote Turn Up the Sun, which also opened the live shows from around about that time.
Was Turn Up the Sun was an album track and also part of the live set, you're right, which was a very proud moment for me.
Blurs just got back together and stuff like that. If Oasis ever did get back together and you got the call, would you join the band again?
Of course I would if I was asked. But who knows if that'll happen ever.
For us music fans, music is the soundtrack of our memories. What song or album, when you listen to it, brings back the best memories for you?
Wow. I would say, I have to say, just shooting from the hip here, when I hear songs from Screamadelica, like Higher Than the Sun, Come Together, and those tunes, they really bring back a time in my life that was really special. And I suppose it is that early time when I just got signed to Creation, but Screamadelica has been a part of my life ever since. So it's always been there with a slightly nostalgic feeling, but yeah, that's one that reminds me of good times.
If you could go back and relive one musical moment from your career, what would it be?
Walking on stage in Wembley Stadium, doing. I'd love to get that feeling again one more time. Going on with Oasis to do the first Wembley Stadium show in I guess the year 2000 or so. To hear. It was kind of about hearing that roar of the crowd and then walking on and playing music. It was pretty. I don't really have to do it again because I did it and I can remember it as if it was yesterday. But yeah, it was a very special moment. That.
And it was recorded as well. I think it was released as a DVD.
Yes. Yeah, it was.
Right. Okay. I'll just shove this one in, Andy. What does 2023 have in store? Will there be any new music for Ride? What's happening?
Yeah, I would say there's a fairly good chance of new music from Ride coming out. And apart from that, I do have a few little bits and pieces like bubbling up that I've been working on with people or on my own. I'm not sure what will come out when, but there's plenty of good new music on the way.
Good. Look forward to hearing it. Well, we'll leave it at that. If you have to go. I have loads more questions, but yeah, I've taken enough of your time, Andy.
We'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. That would be great.
Mate. All right. Thanks, Matt.
Take it easy. Bye bye.